Because I always like when kids come to me with a question, when possible, I like to ask them a question back to just kind of figure out where they're coming from. And sometimes it's a completely different reason than I was about to answer. So like, I'm not going to sit him down and start explaining all the history of the church when he's just asking why everyone's wearing green on March 17th.
I'd say fits this idea of, I'm going to remember this person as an example to follow, as people, as someone who is as close to an ideal of what it means to be a Christian as anybody I can think of.
Welcome to First Families, conversations to encourage you in your family's spiritual journey.
Well, hey, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to First Families,
where we put families first. It's a great day at the beginning of March, and I'm Matt Parker, your friendly neighborhood youth guy.
And I'm Kimberly McElroy, your friendly neighborhood kids pastor.
Yeah.
Woo.
Woohoo. Yeah. So it is the beginning of March, and like there was like this incredibly cold snap right at the end of February, and then boom, it's 60 degrees. Tell me about your feelings about Midwest turning into spring.
So I used to not like spring because being from Austin, you don't get much winter before spring. And so winter's in the 40s and 50s, and then spring is like 80 degrees. And so it just got hot after being mildly not hot for a while. And then I moved to Kansas City, and like it gets cold enough here for long enough that I actually feel the vitamin D when it starts coming. Like I actually enjoy the sunlight. I enjoy the warmth that comes post-winter because we actually have a winter. And so I really like it now. It makes me really excited. When it hit 60 degrees, we went and played some tennis. And I haven't done that in almost 2 years.
That's amazing.
And it was very rejuvenating and nice and beautiful. And then it snowed. And we're back to dreary, and I'm very not okay about it.
Yeah. So I like running, you know, but I don't like running when it's less than 40 degrees outside.
Okay.
So I'll quit running sometime in November, early December, and then come back to it in March or April. And you know, I might run inside a little bit through the winter, but I haven't done it yet. But I really enjoy. That's one of the things I enjoy about springtime. Is getting back out into the sunlight.
Is it miserable to start running after you quit for a few months?
Not really.
That might be enough to make me never actually start back up again.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, it's just kind of like, you know, I'm always slower, you know, in the spring until I can get my speed back up. But
yeah. See, I'm an aspirational runner.
Yeah.
I love the idea of running, and I never do it. And I hate doing it, but I love the endorphins. So, and I don't like messing up my day being super sweaty. And so with all those reasons, I generally end up going on walks instead of running. But there have been pockets of time in my life where I'll get into running for a couple weeks or a couple months. And it's fun-ish, but I've never been a runner per se.
Right, yeah. What's your least favorite thing about spring?
The bugs.
Bugs, the return of the mosquitoes?
Chiggers, just all the creepy crawlies that come out to give you bug bites.
Yeah.
Oh, and plus, living in the Midwest also has given me an irrational fear of ticks. Because they're way more, like, that's not really a thing in Austin either. Like, here it's like you go out on a trail and you got to make sure you don't have a tick bite or a tick crawling on you. And I don't know, something about the threat of Lyme disease terrifies me.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm going to miss every tick bite, which I've heard it's impossible. It's really difficult to miss getting bit by a tick. But it does terrify me.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I used to get ticks all the time. I grew up basically in the woods in Arkansas, and where we came from in Arkansas, we basically lived in the pine forest of southern Arkansas, and ticks were everywhere. Except for when we had chickens. The chickens would eat the ticks.
Ooh, maybe I should get chicken.
Yeah. So anyway, my least favorite thing about spring is daylight savings time. I do not understand why it's still a thing. If anybody can explain to me why daylight savings time still exists and we can't get something passed to get rid of it, please let me know, because I do not understand why it's still a thing.
I don't know, but this is my first year where it's actually going to hit different because I have a kid.
Because you have a kid.
With his own internal clock.
It drives. It sets everything off, and
he was
kids,
young enough in the fall one that
it
didn't impact him hardly at all. Mm-hmm. So I am interested to see what happens when the clocks change, but he does not.
I don't get on a soapbox about too many things, but that is one of them. Mm-hmm. Like I will make my opinion clear. I've written my senator about this.
So. Oh wow, you really you care deeply about it.
I cared very deeply about this. But I do love spring though, because even though you can't really in this area, you can't really plant confidently until like Mother's Day, because it freezes, every so often. I love to garden, and so digging in the dirt, we've got dandelions coming up right now, and some iris, and usually we have tulips, but they don't usually last through the winter, and so we didn't plant new bulbs last fall, so we probably won't have those. But I love gardening and getting back in the yard to do yard work, and
is that a way that you relax? Do you find it relaxing to do that? And de-stressing?
I do. It is
not
very
de-stressing, but unstressing.
It relieves stress for me, and it helps me to relax. And I put in some music in my earbuds, and or I just leave the earbuds out, and I can just listen to the music of the birds. And
were you the kid that loved to play in the dirt?
Always. Yeah. I was always. We were like farm kids. Growing up on the farm, every spring, our neighbor would bring in a load of manure, usually horse manure, and then we'd spread it, and we'd have dirt clod wars and horse clod wars and
horse poop at other people.
Yes, and so I was outside all the time in the woods, digging in the dirt. Yeah. Doing random things, yeah.
Okay, so that tracks. That you love to play in the dirt, and now you love to garden. And I am not good at gardening. I am terrible at taking the time to remember to do the weeds. But I also, as a kid, was not the kid digging in the dirt as much. Okay, this is where I'm going to psychoanalyze myself. So as a kid, I was the kid that if I was outside playing and I started digging in the dirt, I was completely fine to dig in the dirt. I did not do it. Mm-hmm. But I didn't like deciding to. So, I liked playing with Play-Doh, but I hated, deciding to play with Play-Doh because I didn't like the way it felt on my hands. Mm-hmm. And so I usually would choose to not do it, but if I ever did it, I was fine. And so I feel like that's the same with gardening, is I never want to go out and get my hands dirty, but once I do it, I'm completely fine. It's just, I don't do it because I don't like, I guess, bridging into the dirt territory, and the sensory territory is not my favorite. Yeah. I don't know, take that for what you will.
So my brothers and I used to make paper airplanes and fly them in our front yard. And I remember one time we lived out in the country, so we were on septic tank. And so the septic tank was acting up. So my dad dug out the tank and was working on it, but the lid broke. And so it was open, the sewage was open to the air. Uh-oh. But we were still out there flying our paper airplanes. Mm-hmm. And so we were flying them, and at one point, one of the airplanes dropped down into the sewage water. But, we weren't like, oh, well, that's not ever going to be, anything we touch again. We got down there, and we grabbed it out of the water, and we put it on the driveway to let it dry. And then when it was dry, we flew it again.
Resourceful.
Yeah. And it flew better. The sewage water paper airplane flew better after being sewage watered than it did before. Okay. And so as long as the thing was open,
y'all would drench
we would.
Wait, did you ever do an experiment where you drenched it in normal water and sewage water to see if it was the water or specifically sewage water?
My brothers might have. I don't remember. I was pretty young, probably 12, 13 years old at that time. So I don't remember if my brothers probably thought to do something like that, but that wasn't on my.
Smarter, but you were not. So
100%.
Okay.
No, I was younger than that. I might have been 6 or 8. Anyway.
Cool. Well, that's disgusting, but proof that you don't care about getting in the dirt.
Yeah.
And as a result, your house is beautiful in the springtime. Y'all have all the beautiful plants, and I have all of the weeds. All of the weeds. So if you ever if you and Misha want to come garden at our house and scratch that itch of gardening, we have a blank slate.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, we just finished with February, the month of love, and we're in the month of March, which St. Patrick's Day is coming up on the 17th. And so I was thinking about asking you your thoughts on these saint holidays, right? So we've got St. Valentine's Day, we've got St. Patrick's Day. Christmas is a celebration of St. Nicholas and the gift giving and all that stuff. Why do you think we make such a big deal about these days? Have you ever studied that or put any thought into it?
I have not. I haven't spent too much time thinking about the fact that these holidays that you're talking about have these Catholic Church maybe origins. But I imagine you did. So you have some thoughts?
I enjoy this conversation.
Yes.
Because,
so tell me about it.
I wrote this down here. So St. Nicholas is the patron saint of sailors, merchants, archers, repentant thieves, children, brewers, pawnbrokers, toy makers, unmarried people, and students.
It's a lot of things to be patron saint for.
It's a lot of things,
guy.
Right? St. Valentine is the patron saint of affianced couples, engaged couples, beekeepers, epilepsy, fainting, greetings, happy marriages, love, lovers, plague, the plague, the Black Death, the saint of the plague, travelers, and young people.
Is he the saint of COVID?
Ooh.
I don't know.
Does that count as plague?
Depends on who you ask.
I don't know. And so you got all these lists for St. Nicholas and St. Valentine, and St. Patrick is the patron saint of Ireland. And that's it.
And that's it. Everything. I mean, there are engaged couples and probably epilepsy and love and the plague in Ireland. So it's just the all-encompassing.
Right. So these guys, these three saints. There's a whole list of. I was looking at this list earlier. There's this whole huge list of saints, and there's a specific process they have to go through to be canonized as a saint. Like miracles and a righteous life and stuff like that. But these guys, they lived in the second, third, and fourth centuries. St. Nicholas was 3rd century. Valentine was 4th century. St. Patrick was 4th century. So like St. Nicholas could have been at the Council of Nicaea with Constantine, and one of the things he's famous for is having slapped Arius, who was the Arian controversy back in why the Council of Nicaea was. Anyway, you can look all that stuff up later, but it's kind of interesting to me how we identify these special people and say this person is a saint more than anybody else is a saint. And then the Protestant Reformation comes along and says, no, we're all saints.
Priesthood of all believers.
Priesthood of all believers. No one believer is above in status any other believer. And so, the
Lutheran denomination does still acknowledge saints, right?
Yeah. So do Episcopals. Yeah.
And they're Protestant. So there are different levels of that.
Yeah. So do you think it's all right for us to honor these guys and celebrate these days that are named for these guys? I mean, grace. There's always grace, so it's okay for that. But do you think that we're doing anything unchristian or anti-Jesus by honoring these people over other believers?
I think honoring and worshiping are two different things, right? So you can honor someone and celebrate who they were and what they contributed to history and to the church without elevating them to Christ status, right? And I was thinking about in Hebrews how we have the Hall of Faith, and how obviously they're not saints, they're biblical historical people who we can look at, and it says we've been surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, all these people who came before us who pointed us in their faith to Christ. And I think you can extrapolate that out and say in our 21st century, we are also surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and there's people here that we can point to that show us their faith. So then I do think that applies in the years between the Bible and now, that in looking at church history, you can learn from the people who came before us, and you can honor what they've contributed to church history and what they've contributed in their faith, and we can learn from them and celebrate that without crossing and elevating them into a Christ-like status or in an unhealthy spiritual reverence.
Yeah. So do you think, so no one that we know is ever going to be recognized officially by by any church as being, sainted officially.
Nope.
But can you think of anybody in your life that you would say fits this idea of, I'm going to remember this person as an example to follow, as someone who is as close to an ideal of what it means to be a Christian as anybody I can think of?
Yeah. So I had a small group leader in high school, Mrs. Mellis, Karen Mellis, who, maybe she could be a saint. I don't know. She was a strong spiritual leader in my life, and she's someone that really impacted my high school years, both personally and also spiritually in small group, and just the way that she approached her faith and scripture really rubbed off on me and impacted me in a lot of ways. And so I think she would be, and she was a lovely person. She's British. So if you've ever heard the Bible read with a British accent, I don't know if that counts as saint status, but it sounds extra spiritual when you read the Bible with a British accent, just saying. Yeah. But no, she definitely was someone who very positively impacted my faith, and she's a big spiritual mentor.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this idea a lot, this idea of respecting somebody versus revering that person. I think sometimes we take this this idea of a position, like pastors. People do this with pastors all the time, right? They say, okay, well, he's the lead pastor of this church. He must be on another level. He's definitely closer to God. He's automatically
he can do no wrong,
a holy person. He can't do whatever he says is going to be, or she says is going to be this
has that added weight.
Yeah, exactly.
Over the pastor.
Right.
If the pastor loves the color blue, well, I revere that, and so I'm going to love the color blue.
Right.
Something like that.
Something like
probably
that.
Not healthy, but
right.
Yeah.
So we I think pastors should be respected, and I think there's a level of spiritual authority that comes along with being a pastor, but taking that next step into the reverence of that person, I think could be an unhealthy thing. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a fascinating idea. I just Googled the difference between revere and respect. And the AI overview of respect versus revere says, respect is a general attitude of kindness and courtesy, while reverence is a feeling of deep respect or awe. And I think that awe word, we describe God as awesome, we are in awe of God. I think when you misplace that and you're in awe of someone else, to a degree that should be placed on God, should be placed on Jesus, that's when it's definitely not healthy, and not a good spiritual thing. And I think sometimes because pastors, they're communicating God's truth, and they're in that place of spiritual authority, and they are living and breathing, and I can see them. Yeah. I can see how it would be easy to all of a sudden put way too much weight on what they say versus what Scripture says,
right,
and what God is saying.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, for sure. So children's pastor, how do you suggest and how do you plan to have this conversation with Dawson when it comes to a thing like St. Valentine's Day or St. Patrick's Day, and Dawson comes up to you and says, what is this saint thing? How do you suggest we have that conversation with our kids?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'd probably turn it back on him and ask him, have you ever heard of a saint? Just kind of figure out what does he know. If he's elementary age. Obviously, I can't do that right now. Because I always when kids come to me with a question, when possible, I like to ask them a question back to just kind of figure out where they're coming from. And sometimes it's a completely different reason than I was about to answer. So I'm not going to sit him down and start explaining all the history of the church when he's just asking why everyone's wearing green on March 17th. Yeah. And so I don't think it's necessarily let's go preach at you to get your church history right. But I do think there's a bigger conversation of holidays come from somewhere. And there's always a history of a holiday. And so knowing that history can help make that holiday more meaningful. Or it can inform why you make the decisions that you do with celebrating. So saints aside, Easter is a good example. We know the reason we celebrate Easter is Jesus' resurrection. Well, if you don't remember that or you don't ever learn that, then it's going to drastically affect what you do on that holiday to celebrate. Right. And so, we could take a step back and learn who is St. Patrick, who is St. Valentine, who is St. Nick, as a way to celebrate. But I don't think you necessarily have to either.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of rehearsing and honoring somebody for the things that they, should be respected for.
Yeah.
I mean, like I think that encouraging our kids to remember, those who have gone before, like you said, the great cloud of witnesses, I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And we might even turn that to, do you know somebody that's worthy of that level of respect, that we could maybe learn from and pattern our lives after.
Yeah. Well, and I think if we're going in that direction too, like there are things we can learn from Saint Nick, for example. He's the 100%. Easiest because he has the whole story about how he was putting coins in different food or something in people's socks as they were hanging, which is like the history of stockings and things like that. It's a really easy conversation for kids.
Yeah.
Of being like, well, St. Nick was really generous. He saw a need around him and he did something about it. Well, that's a really easy conversation to have. And that also turns into Santa Claus. And you can learn about the history of St. Nick when you're navigating that Santa Claus conversation. Valentine and St. Patrick's Day, I honestly don't know enough about Valentine and Patrick to know how they relate to their holidays. Like
the potato famine and running all the snakes out of Ireland.
Yeah, and what that has to do with wearing green other than Irish and green and stuff. Yeah. And like, honestly, I would have to put a pause on Dawson's question and be like, let me find out, or let's find out together. Maybe figure that out if he's truly curious about why it is what it is. Yeah.
Well, good. That's fantastic. All right. So back to the spring conversation. Mm-hmm. Spring break's coming up. Yep. Do you guys have any plans to?
Oh, maybe. I'll probably find out the week before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's rumors of us going somewhere, but we're not sure where or when. So we've done Arkansas before.
Okay.
Just rent an Airbnb house. Yeah. Are y'all doing anything?
We are thinking about going to visit my parents in Arkansas and maybe going back to our old haunts in Arkadelphia. It's been a few years since we've been back to Arkansas, and it happens to be one of my favorite places in the world. Mm-hmm. And so
that's really fun.
So yeah, so we're thinking about doing that. We have some things that might keep us from actually doing that, but.
It's fun to dream.
One of my favorite things that we've ever done on spring break was going to Petit Jean Mountain. I don't know if you've ever.
I still haven't ever been there, but
Petit Jean Mountain
I've heard great things.
is very, very good place to go if you're an outdoorsy kind of hiking. Mm-hmm. They've got good campsites and a lot of kind of fun markets and stuff like that. It's really, really good place to go.
That's neat.
If you could go anywhere on spring break for a week, where would you go?
My answer is always something like Colorado. Like, that's my default answer for a vacation. Dream vacation. I find the mountains and I go sit in them.
Mountains over the beach.
Absolutely. I'm not a beach person. Yeah. I have some, like Galveston, my family went there growing up, but we didn't go for the beach. You don't go to Galveston for the beach, ever. The beach is there and you admire it from a distance and you, like, acknowledge the seaweed. But really, you go to, like, Moody Gardens and Flight Museum and ferries and all the good food.
The aquarium is very good there.
Yes, it is fantastic. So I prefer mountains. I love the weather. I love the beauty. I love that. That has kind of moved up into the Midwest, like South Dakota, North Dakota. I would love to go to Montana. Mm-hmm. Some of just the Midwest beauty. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah. I enjoy a scenic lake. Get me in the woods by a lake and I'm happy. Or just any body of water. Give me a fire to sit beside and I'm good. My favorite activity is staring silently either into flames or over the sea. So
nice.
So that's
cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite place you've been for spring? Like best spring break memory?
Oh my gosh. We haven't been like spring break trip takers, specifically spring break. Mm-hmm. We've gone out a few times to different places. But when I was serving in Arkansas, we took a spring break mission trip to Mission Arlington in Texas every year. So we'd take half of that week and go do that, and then the second half was open for families to do whatever they wanted to do with it. So
yeah. Well, that's funny because my family was never a spring break trip family. I always wanted to do something and never did. But my church did mission trips during spring break, and so we had a partnership with a church down on the border of Mexico that our church sent groups twice a year for about 15 years. So we had a very established relationship. And the spring break trip, the youth went in the summer and did some VBS stuff. And the spring break, families went and they did some construction and different things like that. And so I went one year for that, and that was really impactful. I also went to Thailand my junior year of high school on spring break.
Wow.
As a mission trip. We did a senior mission trip every other year, and it was to Thailand because we had a partnership with Southern Cross. I don't know. So we had a partnership with some missionaries and some organizations there. And so that was probably top spring break trip ever, getting to go. It's a 30-hour trip to get there. We were going to Pattaya. So it was like a 15, well, because of wind, sometimes it was 12, sometimes it was 15-hour flight to Japan, to Tokyo. Then it was a 7-hour flight to Bangkok. Then it was a 2-hour drive to Pattaya. And then reverse back. And then jet lag. Yeah. Like, it's a day and night switch. It's a 12-hour time difference, I believe. 12 or 13 hours. And so I was pretty exhausted at school the next day. But it was really meaningful. Like, mission trips have played a big role in my faith formation and going to serve other people in a way that's out of your comfort zone, but also meaningful for the people you're serving. It's super important. So, yeah.
Well, whatever you choose to do with your spring and whatever you choose to do with your spring break, let's all make the most of our time and enjoy the creation that God has, the new life and the new sun that even though daylight savings time still exists, I can't get over it. I do not understand.
Yeah, but it's going to get really bright once daylight savings time.
I know it.
So it'll be nice.
It'll be like daylight at like 9:30 p.m., which is crazy.
Do your runs at 9 o'clock at night. So
I could do that.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Have happy spring, and we'll see y'all next month.
We'll see you next time.